Please be seated. A long time ago, I was sitting with an old mentor of mine who preached one of the better Easter sermons I've ever heard. And she confessed that she'd actually lifted the particular line, the quote that made it a great Easter sermon, from a rather famous preaching professor and preacher back in the day, a man named Jim Forbes. He said, when it came to Easter, with God, the worst thing is never the last thing. It's a great Easter line. It's admirable and bright, and you might even hear it again in a couple of days. But the important thing to acknowledge today is that this is the worst thing. We cannot deny that Jesus, someone whom we as followers of the teacher hold in esteem as his disciples did and those who followed him, going through the experience they did when he was arrested, when he was beaten and abused, when he was condemned to death by an empire so vast that his own name wasn't even recorded in its history. He wasn't even a footnote. And he dies on a cross, an ignominious death, numbered among thieves, traitors, and those who sowed sedition against the empire. His body would have been forgotten and left on the cross the days of his own faith's deep solemnities of rest and repose and prayer. Because two men outside of his circle who had deserted him decided to do what they could. They did the very least they were able in the time remaining before the sunset to lay him in an open tomb so that they could come back after sunset the next day and perform the necessary rites. This is the worst thing. We, as followers of Jesus, commit ourselves every Good Friday to assemble, to remember, to reenact and call to mind not just the events of the day, but in some small fashion, try to find within ourselves a sense of resonance, connection, and awareness that if God could go through the worst with us and for us, the most important thing we can do today is not turn away. That persistence of memory, that willingness to enter again and again into the events of Good Friday so that we have a fuller understanding of just how connected God is to us, as to share with us utterly and completely the worst thing. That when God calls us to rise into the kingdom, we can understand the profundity and the import of that transit. But it requires of us a humble sympathy and shuddering empathy to embrace that dark reality of his death on the cross. Psalm 22 gives us the figurement of Jesus' struggle on the cross, so much so that the Gospelers have him quote it so that we can hear that lament and know that it is true and it is still timeless, even in Jesus' day. My God, why have you forsaken me? My mouth is like a dried potsherd. I'm thirsty. And we hope and pray that there will be deliverance that something will happen, that some miracle will occur, that this tragedy can somehow be averted. And yet again and again, every time we return to the truth and the reality that on a particular day, at a particular moment, he cried out, "It is finished." And he died. He dies before our eyes. He dies with his last words ringing in our ears. He takes his last breath from air that we share on this fragile earth, our island home. It is a reminder to us as followers of Jesus that there is no thing that can relieve us of the passion of Christ, nor is there anything that can relieve us of the responsibility of the compassion of Christ. For if this passion is true, then the compassion of God is so infinitely great as to overwhelm our own reticence to hold any human being in contempt, to dismiss any human being as unworthy of redemption, to hold any human being to a place where we are willing to cast them out in the way that Jesus was cast out. And that is a profoundly and shudderingly true challenge to all of us. Because in this reality, we must confront ourselves. As the Lord himself said, if anyone wants to follow me, let him or her take up their cross and follow me. That cross of Christ is one we all know uniquely and profoundly as our own. We gather today, as I said before, to remember the worst thing, but also as well to consecrate the very worst in us, in our lives, all of the traumas, all of the abuses, all of the struggles we have had, all those things we have done and left undone, and render them up as an offering of grace, so that the sins of the whole world may be presented before him, that he may bless them and lift them up, even as he has lifted up. It is our task to remember in every generation, to teach our children and our children's children the awe, the wonder, the grief, and the joy. And to understand that Christ's death on the cross is also our own consecration, to not sit by idly. We cannot linger or tarry in service to anyone who is in need, who is wounded, who is broken, who is rejected, because we have borne witness today to the worst. And even now, we live in hope that as God has posited to us and demonstrated in Scripture again and again, the worst is never the last. In order for us to get to the next, first we have to make a right end. So we join together at the foot of the cross, and we do the one thing we can in this moment of grief and loss. We will pray for the whole state of Christ's church and the world. Please rise.